Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Mr. Businessman. I hope I find you well. My voice is a bit croaky today. I don't know why. I went out for a walk yesterday, and I think I've overdone it. No, I'm all right. I hope you're okay, and I hope you're keeping well and everything, and keeping abreast of the information that's coming to you, both in terms of the media and from myself. Today we're going to do about leadership styles, a really important bit of the topics. Well, the topics are really important to the spec. Definitely always questions on exams about leadership styles and stuff. And I think as well, it's actually very, quite applicable to the situation we're in at the minute, isn't it, in this country? And talking about leadership styles and what's going on and why it's going on and things like that. So, it's an interesting one. It's a bit like motivation. I think that a lot of it is to do with the psychology of motivation and why they choose to act like this and how they feel about their employees and what their sort of inconsistencies and things that they have about their own personality kind of dictates what kind of leader you're going to be to an extent. But other things do it as well. All right, so we're going to get into it and do it from here. I'll just make myself look nice and smart for you, and we'll go from here. Okay, here we go. Let me press this button. There we go. Ooh. There we go. Okay. So, first of all, what do you think the difference is between a leader and a manager? Okay, and don't just tell me leaders lead and managers manage, all right, because they do, but sometimes managers manage to lead. It's sometimes they're confused for one another. The main thing, the main difference between the two is that a leader tends to be more out in front, making big decisions, sort of trying to motivate the workforce as a whole, sort of being the vision for the company in that regard. So they're not just the kind of they're the catalyst which makes the culture for the business. They make big decisions concerning the future of the company and things like that. So that it's all to do with inspiring people, leadership a lot of the time, and making big decisions that are gonna affect everyone. Managers are slightly different. We talked about managers before, but managers is slightly different in the sense that they deal with managing sections of the business, don't they? They deal with the day-to-day stuff of the business. They don't tend to make, although they might get involved with decision making that sort of affects the future of the business and things like that. A big part of managers' jobs is here and now, isn't it? Is dealing with the here and now and managing what we have to do, setting targets, looking at target setting and how we're going to achieve those aims, making sure that we effectively achieve those aims, and looking at whether we've kind of achieved them more effectively and things like that. So if you think about it from the sense that leaders are more inspirational people, they tend to, be quite inspirational in the things. And again, it doesn't mean that managers can't be inspirational, but it's not really a core facet of a manager's position has to be inspirational. Good if they did, but it's not a massive factor. All right. So, leaders perform similar functions to managers, but in addition, they also inspire and motivate the workforce. They consider the long-term strategy, the challenges facing the business, and how to overcome them. Managers control and direct the workforce to follow the principles or values that have been established by leaders. And it can be a little bit confusing, as I said, because sometimes some of the things which managers do, leaders can do, depending on the size of the business, and vice versa as well. You can sometimes get some very, very inspirational managers, and vice versa. You can also get leaders that don't really inspire people and are particularly good at that. So it can be quite difficult to understand. Okay, let's have a look at what we're going to talk about. So explain what is meant by leadership. Explain different types of leadership styles, including autocratic, democratic, paternalistic, bureaucratic, and laissez-faire. Explain leadership theories, including Fiedler and Wright and Taylor. Evaluate the importance and impact of leadership for a business and its stakeholders. Evaluate the appropriateness of various leadership styles and theories to a different business situation. So we've got a nice little bit of AO4 right at the bottom there, haven't we? A nice little bit of, applying it to different situations, looking at whether it would actually be useful and usable in different situations. All right. So usually I would get you to do this in class. In pairs, list everything you can think of that leaders do, or any skills or traits that they may need to possess to do this. Feel free to pause the stream, have a look, write some down if you like. But it's something that we would usually do, and then we'd have a discussion about what you thought, essentially. The same sort of thing comes up all the time, but have a go at that if you can. All right. So what makes a good leader? Well, being informed and knowledgeable about matters relating to business. I've always found I respect my leaders in business. I respect the people above me if they know what the hell they're talking about. They've got to show me that they know what is happening on the ground floor, not just that they can make a guess or that they don't have any idea or interest in it as well. So it's really important that people take an active interest in actually the job that I'm doing in terms of all the things which is going on in the business. So having the ability to think creatively and innovatively and solve problems. So solving problems is a really important one, isn't it? They don't just want to be looking at. They say, don't they, that you should be if you can be in a room and you should be the stupidest person in the room, all right, or the least intelligent person in the room. That's a good room to be in. If you're the least intelligent person in the room, just like if you're a musician, you should be the least talented musician in the band, because then you're always going to be pushing yourself. So, being like this and having a manager who can think creatively, solve problems, a leader who can do this for you. See, I'm doing it now with managers and leaders, aren't I? It's an important one, isn't it? Because they will inspire you and try and make you better as well. Possessing self-motivation and the desire to achieve great things. Now, we've talked about self-motivation. We talked about motivation a bit with the different motivational theories. But has this experience of being, away from college, from being away from school, from being away from work, has it affected your self-motivation? Have you found that you're not self-motivated? Are you not actually doing things? Like for this, I was never asked to do this channel. No one ever instructed me to do this. I just thought it'd be a good idea and just did it. I thought, well, screw it, I'm doing it. and that's what self-motivation's about. I'm not always the most self-motivated person, but I think that's a strength that you should try and rely on for yourself, is try and develop that self-motivation to get out of bed, to make sure that you're trying things, to try and do things off your own bat. Don't wait for other people to tell you what to do, because if you do, you'll be waiting a long time, and other people will be seeing opportunities fulfilled that you would have been able to do had you just been a bit more, get up and go. No one's going to come and knock on your door and offer you £1 million to do anything. But if you get up, and do things, I genuinely believe that as well. I do genuinely believe that if you want to be a pop star, if you want to be a successful YouTuber, if you want to do all these things, there is it's extremely competitive, but it is doable. It is doable. It's just a case of how much time and effort are you willing to put into doing these things. Like these, I've been doing these, give or take 1 or 2 days. I've done this every day since lockdown, other than weekends, which I usually do other videos, don't I? But give or take, I probably missed, 2 or 3 days in the last 2 months. That's what it needs. It's important, and I don't do that just for you. I do that for me as well, don't I? To be able to give me some kind of, things to do, some kind of regular schedule, because I think it's important as well. So think about it from that perspective, all right? Showing the ability to act quickly and decisively when necessary. So can you make those hard decisions? Can you decide that people are going to be made redundant? Are you in a position to be able to do that? A lot of people find it difficult. I think I would find it difficult to do that, but it would be needed sometimes, doing retrenchment and things like that. It can be hard. Possessing an air of authority. So do you have that? When you go into a room, do people take notice or not? Some people do. Some people just come into a room and you think, oh, who's he? Or who there? And demonstrating excellent communication skills, including listening. It's an important one. So are you good at listening? Are you an active listener? Are you someone who will get involved with the conversation? Are you someone who will listen to your peers, your colleagues, your subordinates, and get involved with them and help them out? Or are you just pretending at listening? So, a couple of different leadership styles now. Okay, we've got autocratic, democratic, bureaucratic, and laissez-faire. Now, most of us have already done these. Most of us have already know what these are. But what we're going to do is we're going to go through them and discuss what they are and that, just to refresh your memory if you've forgotten. Okay, but you can choose your favourite and choose what kind of leadership style you think will be successful for you. Not in the sense of you being a leader, although that is useful, but also the sense of what would motivate you to be a good employee in that situation. Okay. So the first one's called autocratic. Now, autocratic orders it to be obeyed without question, and the leader makes all of the decisions, similar to Theory X manager, who doesn't consider all Maslow and Hertzberg's motivation theories. This type of manager can be effective when. Okay, so let's just have a look at this. So let's just break this down a little bit. So orders are obeyed without question, and the leader makes all the decisions. All right, autocratic, very, do as I say. This is what we're doing. Okay. Now, it says similar to a Theory X manager. Now, a Theory X manager, if you remember, is about McGregor, Theory X and Y. And Theory X and Y is all about how you treat your staff, how you think they are. Is X and Y on this? No, I don't think it is, actually. Which is strange, actually. Let's just check. No. Not that I can see. It's okay. So... just to recap what McGregor said in that regard, Theory X and Theory Y is all about what a manager or a leader feels like the employees inherently are like. So it's about how you feel that your employees are. So if you're a Theory X manager, you believe that all your subordinates, all your employees are trying to get away with doing very little and are trying to get away with doing the bare minimum. So if you think people are inherently lazy and people don't want to do the work, and if they could find an excuse not to do it, they won't, then that would mean that you are a Theory X manager. If you're a Theory Y manager, then that means that you're the opposite. You think people are self-motivated. You believe that people do come to work for a reason other than just getting paid, and that even if you did let them off with knowing, or you gave them opportunities to skive, that they wouldn't do it, or they wouldn't do it to very much. Like they would still want to do the job effectively. They would still want to do. They're not trying to look for excuses not to do the job. So it's quite an interesting one because it says it's a manager who doesn't consider Maslow and Hertzberg motivation theory. So we're saying, who would they really like? Autocratic leaders. Autocratic leaders are more like, aren't they? If we're talking about a Theory X manager, are probably more Taylorist. They're more like quite straight down the line. Not always, as I said, autocratic isn't really linked to Taylorism, but in this regard, if the person is person's autocratic and Theory X, then there isn't really much else, is there? If we're saying, yeah, you have to be close supervision of people all the time and things like that, because they're not considering the hierarchy of needs. They're not looking at hygiene factors and things like that. They're not. So this type of manager can be effective when it's really, really pivotal that we make decisions quickly. Or that they've got a workforce that are very flitty, high absenteeism, work turnover's very high, that kind of stuff. Although you could argue that potentially the autocratic nature of the management might be causing that. That would be up for argument, wouldn't it? But basically, yeah. So autocratic is when it's quite simple work. You've got to keep a track of people. Low skill, low wage. You don't trust the workforce, essentially. That's when the best type of thing. But autocratic when, excuse me, it's too early for me. The autocratic when you have to make a decision quickly, and you have to get in an emergency, in an emergency situation. If the company is in dire straits, then autocratic is a good way to go because you can make decisions and get them done quickly. So advantages, yeah, you can make those decisions done quickly. You can be very straight with people. You can find out what people, that you can dictate to people what you want doing, and you can take the any sort of ambiguity out of the instruction. Disadvantages, though, people don't like autocratic leaders. They don't like being told what to do to this extent a lot of the time. And again, that will depend on the person. But a lot of people find autocratic leaders rub them up the wrong way. So it's an important one that to understand that it's not good for all situations. Obviously, that the higher the skill and the higher the pay as well, the less autocratic leaders you're going to get, because you have to assume that these people probably know more about the situation than you. And what about the skills and the abilities of that person? You're completely degrading them by being so autocratic, aren't you? So it's a bit of an up and down. It's an act that we've got to sort of play with, really, and decide which one we want to go with. Let me just grab this 1 second. I'm just going to double check that I've not told you. I did forget to tell you this one is they rely heavily on motivation. On the management, so it kind of gets rid of the like any sort of get up and go that the employees would have, any sort of innovation things that they'd want to do themselves, kind of gets rid of that, which is a bad thing, isn't it? Okay. So, next one's democratic. Now, democratic, the leader consults with subordinates in decisions, so requires effective communication in order to consult, persuade, and receive feedback. Now, it's an important one, this, in terms of understanding what democratic leaders are. Now, democratic leaders they don't, I know this is a strange one, they don't not make decisions. We're not saying that democratic leaders don't make decisions for themselves. They're still leaders, they still make decisions. What democratic leaders do is they try and get people's opinions. They try to help them make a better decision, and they try and get people around them to be on board with that decision before they go for it. Autocratic leaders don't care. Look, this is what we're doing. Democratic leaders try and get people on board. So I've heard people in the exams before talk about democratic leaders as like weak leaders because they don't, or they've got to go and ask permission of everyone around them. No, they don't. They don't have to do anything like that. What they do is they choose to do that because they find that having the skills and abilities of those around them, persuading them rather than forcing them, is more effective. And they hopefully will get the skills and abilities and confidence of people around them rather than making decisions for themselves. Because remember, leaders aren't going to be perfect at everything. They're not going to be experts in everything. Whereas there might be some, or hopefully there's a lot of people around you who are experts, in the specific field that you work in. So don't ignore them. It says can result in a motivated workforce and can encourage creativity and better thought out decisions. So useful when complex decisions need to be made. Yeah, as I said, it's about that thingy, isn't it? It's about understanding that people do have expertise and that ignoring that fact and just going, oh yeah, I'm just going to blunder into this and make my own decisions. Well, that's going to be a bit of an issue, isn't it? That could potentially, risk some quite serious things happening in your business. Potentially not as well. You just have to have a look at the situation, wouldn't you? Sorry, I'm just messing with things on my screen here as well. There we go. Okay. So, in terms of this, I'd say big disadvantages for this one. Can result in a motivated workforce, so can encourage creativity and better thought out decisions. So useful when complex decisions have to be made. So definitely good. Some advantages there. Disadvantages: slow decisions. There's a pressure to follow. There's kind of sometimes I think with democratic leaders, sometimes there is that pressure to agree with them, even though they're not autocratic. There isn't a bit of a weird one there. So basically, you've just got to remember with this one that it's the slowness. It's trying to get people on board. It's trying to thing, and it can create tension trying to convince people if they're not on board with you and things like that. Okay. Now the next one is paternalistic. And paternalistic, similar to autocratic, as leaders make all the decisions and there is no employee involvement. However, they'll try to persuade the employees that the decisions have been made with their best interests, like a parent would. When parents say, "Oh yeah, this is in your best interest," and things like that. So they try and consider the welfare of the employees for that one, which is a strange one, isn't it? You'd think, well, why are you bothering? Why are you doing that? It's a bit weird, actually, that you're bothering, thinking about people like that, because it's a bit. It's just not really what you'd expect, is it? But yeah, people do it. There are some really strong paternalistic companies or managers, leaders that try and get people on board and try and bring them on and try and develop those skills in your best interest. So, and it can work because it creates this bond. It creates this connection between subordinates and managers and makes them feel like they're part of the team rather than just replaceable. We've then got two last ones here. We've got laissez-faire. Now, laissez-faire, the leader has minimal input. He's like the opposite of autocratic. And subordinates are largely left to work independently. Minimum guidance is offered, and workers are given... that should say given scope, not givens scope. given scope to demonstrate capabilities. So we give them scope, we give them the ability to show us what you can do. All right. Now, with laissez-faire, a lot of people think laissez-faire would be brilliant. Oh yeah, well, like Google, where they're very laid back in terms of, hands-off management. We set you the task, you have to do it, and you can do it in any way you want, blah, blah, blah. You don't have to be at your desk. You can do this, you can do that. People think that laissez-faire managers are dead good because it allows people to get away with stuff. And I would say that those people are probably Theory X workers, aren't they? Because they're trying to get away with doing stuff, not doing stuff rather. So it's a bit of a weird one, laissez-faire, because simultaneously it can lead to lazy managers not really doing anything because they don't know what the hell they're doing, not because they're trying to give you any autonomy or trying to give you the ability to succeed, because they don't know what they're doing. You can get, it can kind of develop sort of lazy employees as well who are just trying to get away with doing nothing. That is something that we can do. So it depends on the situation. It kind of links back to the Theory X and Theory Y. What do you think your employees are doing? Now, so what we say, advantages, motivation's high, as because you've got your freedom and you can make your own decisions, which is good. Disadvantages, if workers are not motivated or committed, productivity will be low. You've got to keep an eye on them all the time. Scenario that it's more suited to when independent, highly skilled workers or creativity required, e.g. design. Like I said, Google would be the perfect position because they're extremely skilled people. They know what they're doing and they don't need you to tell them, to do some work. Thank you. All right. And the final one is bureaucratic. Now, you might have heard of bureaucracy and things like that. It's usually talking about red tape, about people who just abide by the rules and, like they say public sector and things, very bureaucratic. They're not doing it because it's the right thing to do. They're doing it because they're bureaucrats and they do it on this bureaucrats in Brussels thing that people are always saying. I think it's because it's a little bit of a alliteration. It makes them feel clever. So basically, what that one is, a leadership style that relies upon procedures and policies, following the rules. Okay, employees are given some freedom to make decisions, but within delegated limits. So job roles are defined formally, and there is an obligation to stick to the job description. Okay, so bureaucratic ones are required when there is something really, really serious. Like if you say like the police or someone like that, then it's important that they stick to the rules, stick to the job, because you don't want a police officer going and beating someone up. Although sometimes it feels like you do want them to beat the people up. So each employee knows precisely what their duties are, tasks to perform quicker and more efficiently. Low-skilled staff know the job role, less mistakes in theory. All right. Disadvantages, though, we've got discouragement of innovation, the lack of ability to adapt to change. They're not going to be, really self-sufficient and have an ability to react to situations if you've got them into this bureaucratic way of thinking, because you're kind of taking the thinking off them a little bit. It's quite autocratic in that respect. Important when paperwork is very important, e.g. health and safety, hospital, or when strict guidelines needed. Accountants in firms and things like that they have very specific law rules to follow, don't they? So basically, when you're looking at these, you need to be thinking, well, what kind of leadership role is applicable to this situation? Would it be autocratic? Would I be telling people to do exactly what I'm saying? Is it democratic? Do I need to get people on board with me? Do I need the sort of permission almost to do things? Now remember, we're not asking the permission, we're asking them to come on board with us, but at the end of the day, democratic leaders will make decisions for themselves if they need to. Is it laissez-faire? So we're just backing off and we're allowing, we know that people are experts in the field and we're allowing them to make the decisions that would be most effective, hoping that, at the end of the day, that we can manage that and bring across a really positive outcome. Is it paternalistic? Are we trying to bring on people? Are we trying to look at what's in their best interests and trying to look after them like that? So again, a little bit like autocratic in the sense that we will try and make decisions, but it's always in the best interests of our employees. Or is it bureaucratic, where you are having very little access to things because it's all to do with the procedure? I've dealt with bureaucratic organisations before, and I have to find them they're very, very difficult. It's usually fine, but if you come to a situation that needs a bit of common sense, and it needs a situation that needs a bit of this doesn't really fit into your model, then they can't handle it, they can't cope, and they keep just relying back to the procedure, but the procedure doesn't work for that situation, so it completely falls over on itself. It's not a particularly motivating place to be if that's the case. Okay, let's have a look at some other leadership theories. Okay, if it there's a problem having two screens, you see. Sometimes it's confusing. Other leadership theories. Okay, so we've got Fiedler. Now, the main ones we're going to talk about, as I said, McGregor is a management theory rather than a leadership theory. So we'll talk about him, but he's theory X and Y. So one's called Fiedler. Okay, so the guy who came up with it called Fiedler. So Fiedler realised that most people are effective in some situations, but not others. For example, a film director would not make a very good accounts manager, highlighting that not one leadership is best. So he was saying that essentially you've got to appreciate that you will probably react differently in situations depending on what's going on. What job you're doing will require certain types of leadership. So he came up with a way to help people decide the type of leader that they are, and so that they could become more effective. All right. So you will inherently be a kind of leader, and he was saying that as long as you know that, you can use that more effectively. So in order to identify the leadership style, he created a questionnaire where leaders had to fill it out, and then the person that they would least like to work with, known as the least preferred co-worker scale. For example, rating on a score of 1 to 8 whether you would least like to work with a pleasant or unpleasant person, rejecting or accepting. Because some people would, it's a strange one. Some people don't want to have anything to do with their colleagues and things like that. It's important to remember that, especially as leaders. Do you want people around you, like who are your best mates and or do you want them to be quite cold to you? Because if they're quite cold to you, there are advantages to being a leader in that respect, because then you can treat them badly, or rather you can be more efficient, can't you? It doesn't really matter if you have to sack someone if you hate everyone, So this is what he was saying, right? Okay, so what Fiedler's model, it's called the contingency model, and he said that there is two different bits to it, really. He said that there is a what we call relationship motivated and task motivated, so two different types of people, essentially. They love that, don't they? They love putting people into categories like that. So the first one's relationship motivated. So he said most effective in less extreme circumstances, i.e. situations that are neither favourable or unfavourable. And this is where you can focus on the relationship. So being a little bit more democratic, focusing on motivating people, bringing people on, making sure that the relationship of the people in the workforce is good. The relationship between you and your subordinates and things like that, and the other people that you work with, is good. Now, the other one that he said that you could be is task-motivated leaders. And task-motivated leaders are most effective when the situation is favourable or unfavourable, so particularly good or particularly bad. So, for example, when there is an enormous trust and respect, or when there is no trust and respect, or when the task is either very clear or is undefined. All right. So he said that if you can get a task which is really clear or not clear at all, the person will have to develop skills then, won't they? So if you're task motivated, then if it's really clear, you can get the most out of your employees because it's really, really obvious what you need. If it's completely unclear, then you will need to make it clear, won't you? You will need to work in that situation, sort of a crisis mode, and work on that task. That being that really specific person who sort of gets us out of this hole, essentially. With the relationship motivated thing, it's more about the fact of it's just if the business is continuing on with neither, it's not an emergency, it's not really, we're not like doing really well or really badly, we're just sort of plodding on. That's what the relationship motivated stuff is more about, is being able to get the most out of people here and now, whereas the task motivated people is always trying to push us to do something. Okay. Now, will it work like that? Yeah, there we go. So he did not accept that leaders were very good at changing or adapting the style. The model gives organisations a way to identify the best leaders for a task or situation. So basically, leaders are the way they lead. They're either task motivated or relationship motivated. And what they do is we need to put them in the right place for the right thing, basically. There is an issue with it though, because it implies, or rather states, that that leaders can't adapt to situations, and good leaders can. Good leaders can adapt to situations and be ready for different situations and things like that. So there's a great deal of middle ground, as leaders do not necessarily sit high or low on the scale, and obviously it'll depend on what it comes out of the test. He does not give enough credibility to the flexibility of leaders and things like that. Now, with this man, let me show you in action, because it can be a bit woolly, Fiedler's model, until you see it in action. So, for example, this is Sam... Is it Allardyce? I'm not into football at all. So when Premier League football teams are in crisis, this man is called in to save teams from relegation. Once they are safe or out of crisis, he's often sacked from more of a relationship motivated leader. So this guy here, well-known manager, football manager, comes in and he's very task motivated. So he's not really interested in keeping people sweet. He's not got a problem with that, because in his line of work, he's not going to be around long enough to really need you to be on his side anyway. All he's bothered about is we're in a desperate situation. We've got to come in now. I've got to fix this problem. You got to do it. I can imagine he's an extremely autocratic leader, and essentially, look, you're doing as you're told, because this is crisis mode now. You need to listen to me, because I need to get you out of this situation. So someone who's thinking, however, when they are out of that situation, he would not be a good person to have, because it's not sustainable to be like that all the time, is it? It's not sustainable to be really task motivated all the time and really pushing people and really like off with people if you need to. No thought to the relationships that are going on, developing those relationships and stuff like that. Hence why when they're out of that situation, they tend to drop him and bring someone else on. So it makes sense, really, doesn't it, in that regard, of why they might feel like that. Now, the other one that we want to talk about is Wright and Taylor. Now, Wright and Taylor and Wright are there's two different theories that come up later on. So I've used Taylor and Wright later on in sort of university stuff as well. And it's confusing because sometimes you start talking about Porter and then Porter's mentioned in different places and stuff. So it can be quite confusing. Now, Taylor from Taylor and Wright isn't the same Taylor as Taylorism. Okay, so I know it's confusing. I wish people had stopped using the same names to talk about things, but yeah, they're not the same. So this theory focuses on not on the style of leadership, but the helping leaders to improve the way they work. So it's literally the opposite of Fiedler. Fiedler says that you can't really change the way you are. You're either a good leader or a bad leader, or rather a relationship motivated or task motivated person, and you can't really change the way you are in that regard. Wright and Taylor say the opposite of that. They say that, well, actually, what we should do is we should try and make people much more adaptable to situations. So there's two key elements to their theory. They need emphasis on what leaders do when they interact with their subordinates, and they need to focus on the skill of the leaders, including verbal and non-verbal skills, and the ability to diagnose what needs to be done in each situation. All right. So this theory is presented in the form of a checklist for improving workforce performance. If you've got that, the Unit 2 revision guide, then you can feel free to have a go at it. But if you Google it, Wright and Taylor checklist, you can have a go at it. I'll try and put one in the description for you can have a go at it. It's presented in the form of helping leaders to systematically think over a problem. Okay, so using a checklist for improving performance from the revision guide, discuss with the partner how you would approach the following scenario and how you would deal with this issue. Obviously, we can't do that, but as I said, in the workbook, it's actually there. So if you've got the workbook to hand, feel free to have a look at it. If you've not, if you go online and have a look for Taylor and Wright's checklist for improving performance, you'll be able to do this. So as I said, you can't do it with a partner, but you can have a go at this. So a subordinate has begun to show a decrease in productivity. She started coming into work late and often submits work to her line manager incomplete and not meeting the required objectives. Okay, so what you need to do then is you need to go through, and there are questions like, I'll show you, it looks like this. If it'll let me pull it over. Will it not? Seems to be struggling. Okay. Just one moment. Will that work? Yeah. Okay, it looks something a little bit like this. The checklist draws for a number of scenarios and possibilities. So these are the possible performance problems and these are the possible solutions. So what you need to do is go through it and have a look at them. So are they not being motivated? So we can have a look at that. Task difficulty, does the person find the task too demanding? In which case, simplify the task. So it's all. What's good about Taylor and Wright is that they give you actual solutions to problems rather than just saying, oh, well, yeah, that's difficult, but we don't really know how to solve it. They actually give you physical ways of fixing problems. So have a go, go through it, have a little go with that one, and it'll help you out. Okay, it's a good one, that. I like that one. So final thing we need to do today really is we need to do some evaluation. So this is your AO4, this is your ability to, evaluate the different scenarios, essentially, so to be ready for that exam. Okay, now in that regard, it says on the spectrum below, so on your thing, if you draw a line between, most impacted to least impacted, identify how much of an impact effective leadership would have on each stakeholder groups and justify how it is likely to impact. Okay, so let's have a look. It says, okay, for this one, all I want you to do is, if you've not already got one, there's one in the book, but if you haven't already got one, draw a line from least affected to most affected, and I'd just like you to have a think about different stakeholder groups on different leadership styles. So you can do a couple of them or do them on the same one. First, do autocratic. So who do you think is most impacted by that? Is it going to be the managers? Is it going to be the the employees? Is it going to be outside the business? Is it going to be customers? Who is it? Because it is going to have an effect on them all, isn't it? And then just put them in place for me. Okay, it's a little task for you to do there. And then the second one, it says evaluate the appropriateness of various leadership styles and theories to different business situations. So let's go through this, because this is what you're going to be doing in the exam. For each of the following scenarios, can you justify, remember I offer justifying it, a specific leadership style? Okay, so in terms of that, let me show you it. Okay, so I'm going to say one. I'm going to say a situation, and then you have a go at telling me what it is. Okay, so it says, for each of the following scenarios, can you justify a specific leadership style? So you're an experienced manager in a cheese factory with many low-skilled employees to lead. What would you suggest? Okay, autocratic, democratic, bureaucratic, laissez-faire, paternalistic. What do you think? Well, in this regard, I would be going with autocratic, because there is the low-skilled employees. They need direction. There's not really any need for innovation in that regard, is there? Okay. Now, next one. You're the managing director of a large multinational business selling a range of electronic devices. The business is structured by function, with each product line set up like an independent business. Okay, so maybe like some kind of cell production-esque thing. What do you think we should do there? Do you think we should be doing democratic? Do you think we should do laissez-faire? Do you think we should do autocratic? Do you think we should do paternalistic or bureaucratic? With this guide, remember, so you're the managing director of a large multinational business selling a range of electronic devices. So we must be the employees must be pretty hot on it if they're making those kind of things. And we're making a range of different products as well. So it's going to be difficult to be able to maintain autocraticness over all of them, isn't it? So I'll be thinking with this one, you might be looking at more of a laissez-faire attitude in this regard. You know that they're experts. You leave them to it to a degree. Okay, so experts in your own business, oversee operations, more like Richard Branson and people like that, letting the business do what it wants to a large extent, but making the biggest decisions, instilling the culture, inspiring people. You're a manager in the NHS working with qualified members of staff. What do you think we should do with this one? So is there an easy one? If you see any public sector ones, what would we be looking at? Probably bureaucratic to an extent, wouldn't we? Because it's life and death, essentially, the situation with the NHS, isn't it? We need to be able to make sure that people are abiding by the rules and people aren't just doing what they want. It's important to, what do we do in this situation that we're ready for it? What do we do in that situation that we're ready for it? Okay. So is there a best leadership style? So imagine you've just written the body of a question, discuss the view that democratic is always the best leadership style to use. How would you conclude the answer? Remember to use phrases like "it depends on" to help you evaluate. Now with this one, what I'd be looking for is you to be saying things like there isn't a best leadership style. It depends on the situation, doesn't it? Has to be situational. Even Fiedler, who says that managers can't do multiple things and can't do, various different types of leadership, agrees that there is better leaders for better situations. So if you're relationship motivated versus task motivated, you wouldn't get that football manager to come in on an average situation, because he wouldn't be good at that. He's only good at really pushing people to make big changes in their lives and big changes to that. Okay. Now, so in the answer, I'd be looking for this. So there's no one best leadership style. The main determinant of what the best style is the situation. A good leader is someone who can adapt their style to suit different circumstances, although Fiedler would disagree because they say that you can't. An approach that might be successful in one scenario might not work in another, with different employees or requiring different objectives. Exactly what Fiedler is saying, that they agree, don't they? And it would also depend on the leader themselves and what style they felt comfortable or most experienced with. It's an important one, that, isn't it, to understand that people themselves will have their own style that they'd like to really use. So now I know in terms of that I haven't been into loads of depth today, and the reason is because this is just a revision thing, isn't it? This is just to get us back into the format of things. God, it looks dark behind me, doesn't it? It's important to go back over these things. So remember, the main things that we've talked about Fiedler, we've talked about Taylor and Wright, we've talked a little bit about McGregor, even though he's more of a management thing. Theory X and Y is more about how they feel about their employees. We've talked about autocratic, democratic, bureaucratic, paternalistic, and laissez-faire, different leadership styles, and it's about implementing those, isn't it? So understanding that in the exam you're going to have to say which do you think is better for this situation, which do you think is better for that situation, do you think there is a best one? The answer's always got to be no, hasn't there? There isn't a one size fits all. It'd be good if there was, but there isn't. So I hope that's been useful for you. Let's have a little look at the news now. The news today has been a bit crazy over the last couple of days, so we're going to have a little look at the situation, what's happening, and obviously it's still very coronavirus things, because because that's what's going on in the situation, isn't it? So okay, let's have a look. So more than 100 virus cases linked to Seoul clubs. This is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, South Korea had opened some stuff up, and then apparently there's been a big shoot up in virus cases again. Ryanair flyers must ask for loo as flights ramp up. That's interesting, isn't it? So they're going to have some kind of things like that. Care homes virus deaths starting to decline. It says here, Transport for London expects to lose $4 billion. Ahead of the Emergency Finance Committee meeting, the organisation said it's $3.2 billion to balance a proposed emergency budget for next year. During the lockdown, it's lost 90% of its overall income. We have done everything possible to help reduce the spread of coronavirus. This was the right thing to do, and it saved lives. It's true, isn't it? And they said that it is a real major issue, the fact that these, public transport is a real bad thing at the minute. What's this one? Chancellor to set out future of job retention scheme. To reveal the future of jobs retention scheme later amid growing calls to extend it. Currently, more than 6 million people are having up to 80% of their wages paid by the government, temporarily leaving on leave from their jobs. He said that it was not sustainable at its current rate. The government is engaging with people in England to return to work if safe. On Monday night, published guidance for making workplaces COVID secure, including requiring employees to carry out risk assessments before they can reopen. Oh yeah, that's good, isn't it? However, speaking at Monday's Downing Street daily briefing, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said he had a sudden big flood of people returning to work was not expected. Well, he's wrong, because there has been a sudden big flood already. Labour's deputy leader Angela Rayner said that the furlough scheme needed to continue and should not be reduced, insisting that it had been a lifeline for workers. She told BBC Radio 4's Today programme that reducing the scheme too soon would cost us in the long run. I agree. It's a difficult one. It's a really difficult one. But in terms of this, if you've got a government which is made up of business people, which is what people voted in, Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, that's what the Conservative economic policy is. And that's not to say any other political party would have handled this better or worse. How the hell would we know that? It's not about that, is it? It's about the. I think what people are looking at is it's the morals behind it. It's the decision-making process. It's not what the country is doing, because everybody understands that they have to do it. It's how they're doing it, isn't it, that people are getting annoyed at. So, because I don't really think politics comes into it in this regard. It doesn't really matter, does it, whether you agree or disagree or like, one political party over another. We're just in a situation now. We're just in a we're just in a extreme situation. What's this one? Joanne Tandy is scared she might lose a job she loves because of a lack of warning about the government's return to work plan. After some confusion on Monday, the government clarified that step 1 of its new coronavirus program would start on Wednesday. Why Wednesday? Why not just wait till the next week? It said people cannot work from home should travel to their job if their workplace is open. It added that workplaces should follow a COVID-19 secure guidelines, but for the Tandy family, the news has caused huge problems. Mrs. Tandy, an assistant manager at Kent Golf Club, which is under the new government guidance on exercise, is due to reopen on Wednesday. Meanwhile, my husband Richard Tandy is likely to return to work in a local chemical factory on the same day, but with schools remaining shut, this leaves the couple, who have both been furloughed until now, with childcare nightmare. What do we do with our 7-year-old? Do I tell my boss I can't work and know that he will need me and will expect me to work? She said that she knew that the golf club would be one of the first sports to return, but the indications were that we'd given more notice than this. There simply hasn't been enough consideration for working parents. This is reality, isn't it? This is stakeholders actually having a bad time of this. Self-employed electrician Adrian Hoskins of Evesham in Worcestershire is not happy about being encouraged to work because of safety issues. The government claims it's now safe to work on a new build or empty house wires, but he said that it's not been enough clarity around carrying out this kind of work. Most of my jobs are domestic, which I started working normally. I'd be visiting 4 or 5 different houses a day. I worry that I could pick up COVID and pass it on unknowingly. It's true. That's a good point, isn't it? But what do we do? What do we do now? What is the solution? They've riled everyone up so much like this, and it is a genuine threat. This is one I saw before as well. Elon Musk defies orders. He says Tesla's reopened its only US electronic car plant in California despite local orders against manufacturing. On Monday, the company's chief executive, Elon Musk, tweeted that production had restarted and it would be online with everyone else. US states that local governments are trying to determine the best way to open up after lockdown. He vowed to move the headquarters out of California if the plant was not allowed to reopen. He has now been vocal about the lockdown orders in recent weeks. Free America now. It's alright if you're a millionaire, isn't it? And you can keep yourself safe. While the state has eased restrictions to allow manufacturing, the place where he is hasn't. On Saturday, Elon Musk said that Tesla had filed a lawsuit against the county, asking for a court to remove the order that prevents the car maker from resuming production. Rather than wait for a ruling, Mr. Musk announced on Twitter that the plant would reopen. See, this is a problem, isn't it? This is leadership in action. But do you not think that I don't know. I mean, is he working in the best interest of employers? Is he just trying to make sure he's seen a bit better? I don't know. It's a difficult one, that one, isn't it? P&O Ferries plans to make 1,100 staff redundant. Can my boss force me back to work? The government has started easing lockdown, but for many, concerns remain. Can you be forced back to work, and what are your rights? On Sunday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that those who could not work from home should actively be encouraged to go to work. Mr. Johnson signalled out people in construction and manufacturing as those who could not work from home who should return to building sites and factories. The devolved governments of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland are sticking with the government's former mantra of stay home and are not encouraging a return to work. The 1.5 million people classed as being at high risk if they catch coronavirus were advised not to leave their homes for 12 weeks. This included people who've received organ transplants or on immunosuppression drugs. A senior advisor and conciliator at the Advisory, Conciliation and Arbitration Service says that these people and millions of others are extremely vulnerable and not expected to return to their workplace. Separately, people who are at risk but did not receive a letter from the government encouraging them to shield for 12 weeks could have to return to work. But Mrs. Law says, hey, that's interesting, isn't it? She's called Mrs. Law and she works in the law. Says their employees should ensure that strict social distancing rules are in place. I don't think that's viable, is it? It's a crazy situation. What can I do if I'm unhappy with it? He said that they should speak to their bosses. To my mind, they can only refuse to work if there has been an obvious disregard for what the government wants employers to implement, for example, social distancing. The employees remain unhappy with social distancing in place, they should report it to their local authority or health and safety executive who can force an employee to take further action. It's not realistic. That what are they going to do? You know, technically, yes, you can do that. Technically, the health and safety person can do that. But there's a lot of politics that goes on with this kind of stuff, isn't there? Individually in companies and stuff like that. So I don't see it happening. No elite sport in England before June the 1st. So this June the 1st thing, yeah, open up everything on June the 1st. Players scared about Premier League return. Interesting, yeah. They're not, are they? They're not just machines. That they are real people, aren't they? Anyway, that's enough doom and gloom for today. As I said, I feel like we're really doom and gloom. It was we're seeing some positive stuff until recently. Anyway, I hope it's been useful for you. I hope it's been a nice little bit of revision for you, and I hope you stay safe until the next Mr. Businessman. I will see you tomorrow. Have a good one.